Naval Support Activity Hampton Roads celebration of Black History Month. Black History Month started as the Negro History Week in 1926 and was founded by Dr. Carter Woodson, known as the father of Black history. He selected the second week of February because it fell between the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and President Abraham Lincoln. In 1976, the celebration expanded to include the entire month. The theme for this year's Black History Month is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. It is a time for all Americans to reflect on both the history and teachings of African Americans and to focus on the progress, richness, and diversity of African American achievements. This presentation highlights several legacy families that have served through times of peace and conflict, such as Sergeant First Class Devin Stovall, Admiral Michelle J. Howard, and Samuel J. Scott.
In 2018, Sergeant First Class Davin Stovall saw a job posted on the Army's tour duty website. He knew it was a perfect opportunity not only for himself but also his brothers Daryl and Daniel, both Army Staff Sergeants. The brothers are full-time members of the Los Angeles Police Department who had once served in the National Guard and were now in the Army Reserve. They all applied and were accepted. 5 generations of the Stovall family have served in the Army, starting with their great-grandfather. A fourth older brother is in the Army Reserve, and their sister is a member of the Mississippi National Guard. Altogether, the 5 generations have completed 9 combat tours.
Admiral Michelle J. Howard retired. Michelle J. Howard was born at March Air Force Base in California, the daughter of former U.S. Air Force Master Sergeant Nick Howard. She graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1982. She achieved many historical firsts throughout her naval career. She was the first Black woman to command a U.S. Navy ship and the first to achieve 2- and 3-star rank. In 2006, she was selected for the rank of Rear Admiral, making her the first admiral selected from her class and the first female graduate of the Academy selected for flag rank. On July 1, 2014, Howard was appointed Vice Chief of Naval Operations, the second highest ranking officer in the Navy. Upon her swearing in, she became the highest ranking woman in U.S. Armed Forces history and the highest ranking African American and woman in naval history. Howard also became the first female 4-star admiral to command operational forces when she assumed command of United States Naval Forces Europe and Naval Forces Africa. Admiral Michelle J. Howard retired on December 1, 2017, after nearly 36 years of service. Mr. Samuel J. Scott decided 59 years ago to apply for the Integrated Engineering and Scientific Staff at NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia. He is the last living minority pioneer of the program. He arrived at NASA Langley on March 26, 1962. Jim Williams, Alfonso Smith, and Thomas Birdsong arrived in the early months of 1962 along with Mr. Scott. Mary Jackson, the first Black female engineer, was already at Langley when they arrived. He became close friends with Mary Jackson and Katherine Johnson, infamously documented in the movie Hidden Figures. Dr. Floyd Thompson was the center director, and James Webb was NASA administrator at the Washington, D.C. headquarters. While working in NASA Langley, Mr. Scott was assigned to the High Temperature Materials branch, where he engaged in many secret research projects. For Mr. Scott, this was an experience of a lifetime. He was able to meet and work with many of the greatest and most capable minds in the science and engineering field. Mr. Samuel J. Scott has very fond memories. Today, interviewing Mr. Samuel J. Scott from NSA Hampton Roads Diversity Committee will be OS1 Sapphire Bell and AGC Kiara Garner.
Let us know a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I was born in Mobile, Alabama, raised in Tampa, Florida, and left Tampa in 1953 to go to Pittsburgh. I attended segregated schools all the way up to the 11th grade. I spent the 11th and 12th grades at Shinley High School in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Leaving there, I went to the University of Pittsburgh to obtain a degree in mechanical engineering with what they called at the time an aeronautical option. Upon graduating from the University of Pittsburgh in 1960, my first job was with the Naval Air Materiel Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at the Philadelphia Naval Base on South Broad Street. I spent almost 2 years there until NASA had put out an invitation to engineers in the federal government to help them backfill many of the slots that were left open when so many of the engineers from NASA Langley here in Hampton relocated down to Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. So in March of 1962, I moved here to Hampton. Did not have an interview. They never know who I was except for my government application. And I came to Hampton and I started at NASA March 26, 1962. I was a little hesitant about coming back south again because I had experienced all of the segregation, et cetera, that went on in the South, being in Mobile, Alabama, and Tampa, Florida. But I came anyway because I wanted to work in the space program. Now, I started work at NASA in the high temperature materials branch. And we were a big part of the team that developed the Gemini and Apollo heat shields for the astronauts to re-enter the Earth after circling the Earth initially and then going to the moon later on. So I did a lot of the work on the heat shield, both materials and structures, to protect the astronauts upon re-entry into Earth's atmosphere during that period. Growing up in Mobile, Alabama and Tampa, Florida, my mother passed when I was 7 years old. She passed in 1945. So my experiences in pre-World War II and World War II Alabama, I had many, shall we say, mentors and teachers who encouraged me at that time. Now, then I left Mobile, Alabama in 1946 and moved to Tampa, Florida, where my aunts and uncles were, because my father was a merchant seaman. And he was at sea most of the time. The rest of the family lived in Tampa, Florida. So we moved to Tampa, Florida, so that my aunts and uncles could, shall we say, take care of us. They were kind of rough, and they knew that, you know, they weren't going to put up with no stuff. Let's put it that way. So you had to toe the line, you had to get educated, and you had to do all of those things that are necessary to discipline yourself, to take care of yourself. Now, then my sister, with her husband, who was a World War II veteran, they had moved to Pittsburgh during that 1946 to 1953 period. She came and took my two brothers and I, one older, one younger, up to Pittsburgh. And that was the first time we had participated in any type of integrated schooling, which was a very, very excellent period of time, because you got to be in an integrated system and in an integrated relationship with many, many people. Now, of course, Pittsburgh has a real variety of races, ethnicities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was fortunate to be able to partake of that. But all during my time in elementary, junior high school, and high school, back then we had junior high schools, and then senior high school, 1 year in segregated senior high school and 2 years in integrated senior high school. Of course, the University of Pittsburgh was integrated. Not very many of us, but you know, you did the best you could. And one of the things that was unique, I don't want to say unique, but kind of interesting, was when I applied to the University of Pittsburgh to become a mechanical engineer with an aeronautical option. I was questioned very thoroughly by the admissions officer. Now, we didn't have SATs and all of that. You got there on your grades from high school. He questioned me very seriously, and it was like he was trying to turn me away from going into those fields. And I said, well, that's what I want to be. Now, I learned all of that from my aunts and my uncles and my mother and father and sisters and teachers and those kind of people. And then after I left NASA in '67, I left NASA because they had started shifting monies and funding well into the actual launch of the space shots and the moon landings. We had finished our research and development work back in starting in 1960 on up to about 66. So I left NASA in 66 and went to the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, which was under Tenneco at the time. And I did a lot of work on the Polaris and the Poseidon nuclear FBM, Fleet Ballistic Missile Weapon Systems, at Newport News Shipbuilding.
One of the questions we would like to know was, are you still involved in the field as far as being a consultant, a teacher, or a mentor?
Only in a mentoring capacity. We still do things like meeting with other later on NASA employees. As a matter of fact, we had a tribute to Mary Jackson of Hidden Figures last night at her church, Bethel AME Church, right here in Hampton. Katherine Johnson attended Carver Memorial Presbyterian Church, and we did a lot of honorariums for her at that time. So they have always been very good and close friends of mine since I've been here.
Wow.
But I no longer participate on a regular basis or have any work to do in that regard. We have so many great Black engineers, scientists since I came in '62. We have them all over NASA. As a matter of fact, the director for NASA Langley today is a Black man. So
wow,
it's been a ride. Okay.
Speaking of the changes from the past to present, what changes have you seen as far as NASA from when you were a part of NASA to presently?
Quite a few, because one of the main changes that occurred after I left, right during the time I was leaving in late '66, was, you remember now, you have to remember or understand that NASA does not manufacture the rockets and the space capsules and the data and all of that kind of telescopes and all of that kind of stuff. That's all left to private industry. NASA has always been a research and development organization. So you did basic research when you went to NASA, transferred that technology to the aerospace industry or the electronics industry, and So much of the basic research is gone away, and we primarily do what we call applied research now, more so than basic research. Now, I don't know if the people, many people understand that, but there's a difference in basic research and applied research. I engaged mostly in basic research early on in the 60s. The the ability of minorities to participate in NASA has increased tremendously. And we have had, since I came, when I came in 1962, we had 4 male Black engineers, myself, Jim Williams, Thomas Birdsong, and we had one scientist, Dr. Alfonso Smith. He was not a doctor at the time, but we were the first 4 Black males that came in engineering and science to NASA Langley. The 2 females, Mary Jackson and Katherine Johnson, had been there since about 1957, 58. They were the human computers in the movie Hidden Figures. So things have progressed along very well. We're much more accepted now than we were for the most part. But you know, we stand on each other's shoulders, we get behind each other, and we push forward. Let's put it that way. I'm going to use those terms. We didn't do any marching and participation in the civil rights movement during those early years for one simple reason. You had to have a secret clearance, and J. Edgar Hoover was the FBI director who you got your clearance from, and he presumed every Negro who participated in civil rights was a communist. So you couldn't get a secret clearance if you were a communist or thought to be a communist. So we kind of kept our powder dry, shall we say.
How do you feel as a Black man, you've had an impact on history, both locally and nationally?
It's been I'll just say it's been a great ride. I was able to meet a lot of people, and I'll just say very important people in the space program, in the nuclear missile program, Polaris and Poseidon program. Back when I first started at NASA Langley, well, let me go back to the Naval Air Materiel Center. One of the people I worked with was a Dr. F, as in Frank, but it's Friedrich. And he kind of like took me under his wing while we were doing Polaris, very, very early Polaris initial work. And I really appreciated that. All right. Then I went to NASA, met nearly all of the Mercury 7 astronauts, and then some of the later ones. I even met some of the later, my second stint at NASA, I met a lot of the astronauts for the shuttle program, which were separate from the Mercury 7. Then working for the Navy at the Naval Air Materiel Center, and then coming here to work for NASA Langley, and then spend 5 or 6 years there going to the shipyard under Tenneco. I was able to meet Admiral Hyman Rickover and several of the other people who were very important in the early nuclear submarine programs.
And I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to answer these questions and shedding light on history for us.
Oh, my pleasure. Once you have your self-discipline, and that's taught by your teachers, that's taught by your parents, your aunts and your uncles and your other friends, etc. Once you do that and you have the ability, then you can achieve anything you want to achieve once you set your sights on it and set your goals. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, I dream about, well, you don't. Let's put it this way. It's kind of simple. A dream is something you have for somebody else. A goal is what you have for yourself to achieve. And then you've got to go on a mission to achieve the goals, to achieve the dreams. So without the discipline and without the desire to be something or become something, you can flounder very, very easily. Now, we had the aunts and uncles and the mothers and the fathers and the sisters and the brothers and the neighbors and the preachers and the teachers to stand behind us and push us on, and made sure we did the things that were self-disciplined, goal-oriented, and mission accomplished, shall we say. So those are the things that create the desire in a person, male, female, black, white, yellow, red, brown, or anything else, to move from where they are now to something better that they truly want to achieve.